Hey guys, so we just wanted to answer a few questions, kind of enter into a Q&A time. We get a lot of questions, so we just kind of wanted to go over and just talk about some frequently asked questions about what's it like to be married where one of the members is same-sex attracted.
I would say that there are times that I've struggled more with the question of would I be happier or more seen or whatever with a woman, and I've shared these questions that I've wrestled with before, but I think within God's plan, this is exactly what He calls us to. If there's going to be sex, it's going to take place in a marriage between one man and one wife. And so with that, because we've only ever had sex with each other, I can't look at our sex life and be like, well, it's nothing compared to this other thing that I've done before, because that hasn't taken place. And so I think there's seasons where I've struggled with a sex drive, but I also would look at I'm bipolar and I've had 2 kids in the span of 4 years of being married. And so I think there's a lot that goes into that.
The short answer for me is no, I don't at all. The other short answer is I have 2 kids. So I also think that there's, and this is pretty common with any question, and I'll probably come back to this with other questions too, is that there's almost always this unstated assumption in the question that if I was married to someone who is completely opposite sex attracted, or if she was married to someone who was same sex attracted, that no marital issues, no relation issues would ever exist, and that anything that hypothetically does in a marriage is only there because of this. But that's certainly untrue. There are, unfortunately, a lot of heterosexual relationships and same-sex relationships that there is unfaithfulness involved. There is extramarital activities and just really unfaithfulness that goes on, and that's not something unique to any relationship that there would be struggles, I would say. First time she did some sort of ministry thing, and maybe it was talking about this, I had just even made it a point to specifically bring up, I was like, part of being in a public-facing ministry is that you and both of us are always going to have some sense of public pushback and inquiry and all that stuff. So I think to me it makes sense that it happens. It's not unexpected, and it's not frustrating to me. I think people, including myself, are curious, and so when they find out about that, they want to ask questions, and there's nothing wrong with that. It seemed like Jesus welcomed questions, and a lot of people asked him a lot of questions, so that's it's not frustrating to me. It's okay to me. I think there are boundaries. I don't know if we have it written out on a piece of paper, "Thus saith the marriage." This is, it's. I think it's more kind of typical boundaries of just within reason. What happens in the bedroom stays in the bedroom, if you will. And I think that's just a healthy boundary.
Yeah, and I think when there's been seasons that have been harder, when I've maybe struggled more with temptation, that even though this part of my life is a public ministry, I think there's a lot of safety in not broadly sharing oh, I'm really struggling right now, especially on the internet. And so for me, I have pretty strict boundaries with, okay, when I'm struggling, if there's a season where I'm struggling more, then I'm going to share with my therapist, I'm going to share with my mentor, and I'm going to share with Austin, but that's it. I'm not going to allude to it on the internet, and because I don't want to welcome more temptation, even though I think that's never people's goal, is to bring temptation into your life, but that's another boundary that I try to keep pretty tight. That's a great question. I think at the beginning it was kind of It was more nerve-wracking just because we hadn't done it before, and it was still a scary conversation to have. And now it's much more, thankfully we haven't had to have that conversation a ton.
No.
But I think it's more just being really, really honest and trying to do it bring it up when we have time to actually talk about it so that we can communicate well. So I'm not going to bring it up in the middle of dinner or when our kids are going crazy. I'm going to make sure we talk about it when we have at least an hour to sit down and say, okay, this is where I'm struggling. This is how I think this is what I need help with. This is what my therapist and I have talked about. This is what Lauren and I have talked about. Do you have any questions or are you concerned? Just giving ourselves, it's not necessarily how we communicate, but giving ourselves ample time to get all the communication out on the table. And if there's any insecurities between us, voicing those and making sure we do that.
Yeah, I think that's even in both directions, not even specific to this topic of just, I think we have created kind of a culture, if you will, within our marriage before we were even married, really, of just honesty and just being even if it's oh, I feel guilty about this or I feel some turmoil about this thought or this thing I did, just being, again, having a kind of a safety in our relationship of just letting the other person communicate that and never ever screaming at each other or guilting or shaming the other person and just being we're two human beings who are imperfect and just having grace for each other. I never feel stressed about, sharing something with Brenna because there's a track record of the response being gracious.
I think the biggest thing that is he's always stayed calm when we've talked about before how anxiety in responses can be super damaging and can really shut doors or create walls and kind of want to keep things more in. And so something that I really appreciate about Austin is that has never been the response. He's never responded to me out of anxiety or out of fear, and that is something that just sets the tone for those conversations. And I think because of the honesty that we've had, it's kind of always this, okay, now when I share with him, he's usually okay, now I'm aware. So you're always welcome no matter what time, I'm ready to have this conversation or I'm ready to help you. I'm ready to jump in whenever you need me to, or hey, do we need to do something different? Is there something else we can do? He's always been very proactive in his responses towards me and helping me.
Even just how you come at the conversation. I think a lot of times in any relationship, if there's something difficult or like that, you can come at it from the other side so this means it's over or something, very dramatic ultimatum sort of fashion to it. But just knowing that the context of any of these conversations is us in a committed relationship and that we're she's my best friend. And so it's just a matter of just walking through them together. And it's not, is this the end? It's, all right, let's go through this. And again, not even specific to this. It could be anything, whatever their issue that may come up on an individual level or within the relationship. Just being I'm committed to you and you're committed to me. Let's go through this together, whatever it is.
That's a great question. I think I would say take account how your relationship has gone. So if you have had a history of having kind of more anxiety-led conversations, it might be super helpful to pull in a trusted third party that you both trust. That's really, really important. And so maybe it's a therapist, maybe it's a pastor, maybe it's a friend, to just say hey, I have something that's that I want to share with you, and it's important to me because it has affected me in these ways. And it's important to me that I share this with you because I believe it's going to help our intimacy, or it's going to help you understand me and my past better, or maybe my trauma better, whatever it is, whatever those reasons that it's important for you to share, like share that first, and like know that you can do it in a way that is safe for you both. So that might look like bringing in a third party. Sometimes when I've had to have hard conversations with Austin, my mentor has really encouraged us to Brenna, why don't you write it out in a text, or why don't you write it out in a letter? And sometimes that can be a lot easier too. So I would just take into account who you are as a person, how you respond, who your spouse is as a person, how they respond, your track record between each other, and then cultivate a situation that will be encouraging and uplifting rather than something that would maybe cause more tension, if that makes sense.
I think preferably too, not shaming if you're hearing this and this is not the case. It would be something you bring up before marriage too. It would be something in the dating phase that you would talk about. But if you find yourself in that case where you're already married and bringing it up, I think those are all great points. And just recognizing every person is uniquely different and uniquely made, and that there really is no you do this. It's really understand the person that you're married with and how would they personally best receive that type of a conversation, type of information.
I always say a language of inclusion is really important because there's so many same-sex attracted people in your church. It doesn't matter if you're affirming or not affirming, or what kind of church you have. Even if you were no one's ever told me that, they are in your church. Mm-hmm. That's what statistics say. And so I think it really just needs to start with the church when we have conversations about relationships, or doing relationships series, or talking about things of struggles. I think the church is so well equipped to talk about mental illness now, is so equipped to talk about and help people who've had abortions, people who are going through divorce. I think this needs to be another thing that we're just talking about regularly, that it just needs to be that there are people in our church who are same-sex attracted who we need to support and we need to love, but we also don't need to single them out. So I think that's really, really helpful. And then I think I always think it's easier when you hear it first from a stage. And so whether that's if there's someone in your on your staff who can talk about it to your congregation, or if it looks like bringing someone else in who can share, hey, this is what I've struggled, this is what I've struggled with. This is how I've seen God work through that. This is what I believe God's plan is for people who are same-sex attracted. We love you, we see you, and we recognize that God is calling same-sex attracted people to himself, just like he's calling all these other people. And then realizing, I guess just again, not being shocked when maybe a couple who's one of them is same-sex attracted, they come in, they say, hey, we want counseling because we're struggling with temptation through this. Just not being oh, I didn't know. You want to have a gracious response to that, and just being gracious and kind and understanding.